Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show. Today, bringing you another really awesome guest involved in creating a better tomorrow for all of us and the planet. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Rita El Zaghloul, who is director of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People Secretariat, which is an intergovernmental group of more than 100 countries. It's co-chaired by Costa Rica and France, and by the United Kingdom as ocean co-chair, and the championing a global deal for nature and people with ultimately the central goal of protecting at least 30% of land and 30% of the ocean globally by 2030. And this 30 by 30 target is a global target that ultimately aims to halt the accelerating loss of species and well as protect vital ecosystems that are the source of all of our economic security. Prior to this role, Ms. Zaghloul served as coordinator of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature on behalf of Costa Rica as part of the Costa Rican Ministry of the Environment and Energy. And she also served as minister, counselor, and international relations advisor at the permanent mission of Costa Rica to the United Nations. Ms. Zaghloul studied international relations and affairs at Universidad Latina de Costa Rica and Universidad Nacional de Costa Rica, and then received a master's focused on conflict, security, and development at King's College London. A lot of very interesting themes to get into today. We're honored to have her with us. Rita El Zaghloul, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you so much, Ira, and thanks for the introduction. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you and your audience.
It's great having you. I wish we do more of these themes, so I'm really glad to have you with us today. Would love to start off, as we typically do, by handing things over to you to get started. Love to hear a lot more about you, your background, and a little bit about the development of your intellectual interest and everything related to international relations on through conflict, security, and development studies, and hear how all this amazing journey that you've been on got started.
Great. So just to take you a few years back, so I am Costa Rican Lebanese. I was born in Lebanon, and my family decided to move to Costa Rica, and when I was 12 years old. So it was quite a change to move from Lebanon to Costa Rica, in a different language, different culture. I fortunately had some family in Costa Rica, so that transition was a bit easier, but I did not speak the language and had to undergo through a lot of, accommodations and trying to adjust to the culture. And I think right at that moment, an intense need of understanding the different cultures and the different, ways of thinking and ways of living started at a very young age. Having the understanding of the different ideals, the different vision. Of course, there's quite a bit of contrast between Lebanon and Costa Rica, and being faced with that in such a young age, I think it impacted me a lot. And so I remember when I was 15 years old, I was trying to understand what I wanted to do in the future a bit more. And I had so I studied in a French-speaking school because I didn't speak Spanish at the beginning. So I spoke French since I was very young. So I was in a French-speaking school, and I was talking with my economy teacher, and I was telling her about this, need of wanting to learn and understand much more about the different culture and how to have much more cohesion and coexistence between the countries. And she told me, I think you should look into international relations and maybe diplomacy. And as soon as she said that, I think something kind of lighten up in my head and my heart as well. I think it has always been quite connected. And that's where my love for the multilateral system started when I was quite young. And I think having that experience and that contrast between the two countries that I had lived in really sparkled that interest. So I was quite lucky to be able to pinpoint exactly where I should be going. And I was quite perseverant. So since a very young age, I knew that this is exactly what I wanted. So I started working towards that. I was quite lucky because I mean, circumstantially, because everyone says, oh, how come you talk four languages? And I say it's been mainly circumstantial for me because being born in Lebanon, you learn very quickly Arabic, French, and English. So it's a country that is quite rich in that sense. And when I moved to Costa Rica, I of course learned Spanish. So having that as an advantage on my side, I was able to work with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica, and then I was appointed as Minister Counselor at the mission of Costa Rica to the United Nations. So I think in a way that permitted me to be much more, to be able to understand much more the different topics. And I think, of course, my education supported that as well. So I think it was both education and circumstances of my life that brought me to this point where we're at today.
Outstanding. And yeah, I mean, the work that you were doing as minister counselor per the permanent mission to the UN was quite diverse, but clearly I see in some of these activities your involvement in the Decade of Family Farming initiatives, your work per Climate Action Summit and nature-based solutions, and obviously being in Costa Rica, which we profiled several folks from Costa Rica in the past, and a lot of what's been going on there in terms of the creation of the bioeconomy, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But clearly you immersed yourself in this role in many aspects of what leads into what you're doing now. Talk about those times, if you would, in some of these different initiatives, because clearly we see you stepping into the importance of in the environment, of sustainability, of climate quite early on in your career. Say a few words about that, if you would.
Yeah, of course. So as I started working at the mission of Costa Rica to the United Nations, you know that the UN is divided within 6 different committees, and the mission was quite small. So I was mainly in charge of the 4th committee, which is the committee that deals a lot on, issues of decolonization, peacekeeping operations, and looking into peace and security issues. So that was actually, it was quite a passion for me. And of course, being a small country as Costa Rica had not only it was small, but it actually had like a very big impact on in the international arena. So very quickly, when I started working at the mission, I realized that impact, and I think it's because such a small country was able to do, very big steps at the international level. I mean, as you might know, Costa Rica abolished its army in 1948. So it's a country that has taken those big steps, but also, there's also this balance between nature and peace in the country. And so, for instance, in the 70s, the country underwent through a lot of reversing the deforestation and went into actually making sure that the country, the area, the forest coverage of the country grew much more, and there was a shift into the policies in order to be able to achieve that. By the 2000, they were able to reverse the deforestation, and actually now the country has over 60% of its area that is forest coverage. But then when I was in my previous role at the mission, I was able to also work on the Decade of Family Farming, as you were mentioning, the peacekeeping committee, where it was a committee that actually looked into how the different countries were able to have the discussions beyond the Security Council, because usually everything related to peacekeeping operations is dealt within the Security Council. So this committee kind of brought a bit more of democracy into the equation, and the countries, the countries that were contributing with police and with with all their personnel into those peacekeeping operations, they were able to talk about those different topics. So I think that formed quite well, and it was quite interesting to be part of that. With regards to the to the decade of family farming, that subject was quite different than this one, but it was also quite interesting. It was working a lot with small organizations, small farmers as well, understanding what were the main challenges and bringing the different dots into the equation. It was a work that actually Costa Rica and France also started back then. I've been also, for some reason in my life, it's always been those two countries that have been coming together into the different initiatives that I have worked on. And in that moment, by the time that the decade was announced and that was adopted, there was over 100 countries that were supporting that decade to come into place. So I think in a way that also formed a lot and widened a bit more my focus beyond only peace and security. And then the last year that I was at the mission, I had the opportunity to also work, as you were mentioning before, on the Climate Action Summit. The Climate Action Summit was actually kind of advocated by the United Nations Secretary General. There were several streams of work that were kind of established, and I was representing Costa Rica in the stream of nature-based solution that was championed by China and New Zealand. And actually, that's where the mention of 30 by 30 was first put on the table. That was in 2019 during the United Nations General Assembly. So I think in a way, and having the opportunity of working in such a small mission provided me the possibility of being able to work on different array of topics and to really be able to enrich also my personal interest in those different topics. And as I was mentioning at the beginning, I think the fact that Costa Rica has been having that, interlinkages between the protection of peace and nature, it's been something that has been always in my career, and that I have been lucky enough to be able to advocate for that and to represent Costa Rica when I was representing Costa Rica and being able to talk about those topics. It was quite an honor for me to be able to do that because, it's coming from such a small country, it's really great to see the impact that it can have in the multilateral system as well. So I think being able to advocate and to champion all those different processes was quite intense, a lot of work, but also it provided me with the opportunity to be able to see and to understand much more how the negotiations work and how to be able to really listen, understand what are the different points of view, understanding the different circumstances and realities of the different countries and trying to reach consensus, which is mainly what we try to do in the multilateral system.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's, you mentioned small country, but sort of big steps that you've been involved in taking. And, based on a past part of my career, I had the opportunity to meet both Ambassador Lorca Castro and Dr. Palavega Castillo, the Ambassador of the United States and Costa Rica's Minister of Science, Technology, Communications, respectively. And, I had them both on the show, and they were both talking about their respective roles in, what they were both defining as sort of Costa Rica's development of a bioeconomy, where whether it's health or energy or various other, agriculture, we're becoming a bio-based system. And Costa Rica was really leading as a small country on this initiative. Can you just say a couple words about, based on your time at the Ministry of Environment and Energy, obviously that plays a major role in all aspects of potential bioeconomy. Can you say a few words about that, as you move from the multilateral system into the ministry, a little bit of your role there as well? I think it's important.
Yeah, of course, I think, as I was mentioning before, the fact that Costa Rica also was able to deploy a variety of different levers to promote the restoration and protection of nature, I think that also changed a bit how the country and the DNA of the Costa Ricans was working. And I think that's where there was like this shift in the mentality also at a national level. And I think we didn't see the fact of protecting more nature or being much more conscious of how to restore our nature. That didn't come in detrimental of the development of the country. It actually kind of changed a bit how people were looking into that really that mind shift, or that prerogative that was quite shifted. And as you know, like there's the nature-based tourism that is quite heavy in Costa Rica, and it's quite prominent. And I think we're very proud of that. I think those steps are the ones that I was mentioning before. It's not only the possibility of just saying this is what it needed to be done and actually not doing all the work, but in the case of Costa Rica, it was one of the countries that was having the heaviest deforestation in our region. And within, like, I mean, within a time frame of 20 to 25 years, the country was able to completely drop the deforestation, minimize the deforestation, and become one of the countries that now has, you know, a lot of, I would say, innovative mechanisms. There's the payment for environmental services, the PSA, and it's one that has been really pioneered by Costa Rica and now has been replicated into different countries. So I think in a way, as I was mentioning before, it's a way of trying to see how understanding the national circumstances, how can we do those big jumps, but at the same time taking into consideration how that impacts the people in the country, and how to make sure that they are coming on board, understanding that this actually does not come in detrimental of their development, of being able to subsidize all the different activities that might actually help the people in being able to support these type of policies and that mind shift in the country.
Wonderful, really wonderful. And that leads perfectly into your responsibilities now, because clearly this current role per the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, 100+ countries. Take a little time on this to sort of walk us through the HAC, a little bit of its history, and a little bit of what, as director of the Secretariat, your daily responsibilities entail, because here you are not just obviously representing Costa Rica, you did that before, now you are overseeing 100 countries and everything that goes on in meeting these 30 by 30 targets. We'll get into some of what's going on in terms of the different tools and projects that are happening, but take a little time to walk through the AHC for us, if you would.
Of course, and maybe I'll take a bit more time because it's been quite a few years that I've been working on this, and there has been a bit of shift in the in how the coalition has been working.
Sure.
So as I was mentioning before, in 2019, that was the Climate Action Summit that was convened by the United Nations Secretary General. That was the first time that actually the 30 by 30 was put on the agenda by Costa Rica into the into an international or multilateral forum. I mean, it was the 30 by 30. It's not only a sketchy kind of word, but actually it was based on scientific evidence. And this effort started by Costa Rica, as I was mentioning, in 2019, but very quickly, France was quite keen on supporting this effort. And so several countries came together. At the beginning, it was only 5 countries that started this effort of trying to make sure that the target of protecting at least 30% of the planet's land and ocean was going to be adopted at the United Nations CBD, which is the Convention on Biological Diversity. So mainly back in 2019, there was a negotiation that was going to be taking place in 2020, and part of that negotiation, this 30 by 30 was going to be an issue that was going to be discussed and hopefully adopted. But it wasn't a reality back then. And so there was a need for countries to be to understand much more the issue about 30 by 30. Why are we protecting more of our nature? Where is this evidence coming from? And there was really quite a push on the diplomatic side of trying to make sure that the different countries understood the importance of this important goal. And that work really started like very in a very small scale, you know, having ministers and engaging ministers from Costa Rica and France with other countries, trying to make sure that, you know, the message was out there, that the evidence was also presented, that other countries understood why it was so needed to do this. And so, as I was mentioning at the beginning, it was only 5 countries back in 2019. And by the time that the coalition was launched, there was 50 countries that joined the coalition. It was launched in 2021. Now, you know, of course, because of the COVID pandemic, everything was pushed back. And so, of course, what we had really thought about from at the beginning of having this effort for a year, it actually took several years to have the adoption of this target, because the negotiations kept on being pushed back. So there was a lot of effort on getting countries to understand, to get on board, but also to make sure that the momentum was there, because of course, because of the discussions were being pushed back, there was a bit of a sense that if we didn't do that quite quickly, not only we might have missed our opportunity, but also we are missing years. You know, this target is up to 2030, and the time was, you know, passing by, and we hadn't agreed and adopted this target yet. So there was a bit of urgency happening in that first phase, as I like to call it, that first phase of the coalition. By the time that we went into the negotiations, which were in 2022, there were 117 countries that had already been on board with the coalition. So in the Convention of Biological Diversity, there are 196 countries. From those 196, 117 had already committed to the coalition and had already committed to the fact of wanting to adopt this 30 by 30 target. So this was quite a diplomatic achievement. There was a lot of effort put from the co-chairs, from Costa Rica, from France, and then from the UK as Ocean co-chair. And it was quite a lot of you know, adjustment, also making sure that throughout the pandemic we were able to continue that engagement with the different countries, despite the fact that, you know, ministers were not able to meet, or technical teams were not able to meet and discuss this issue. I think an important point also to mention is that throughout those years, those first years of that those years of that first phase, sorry, of the coalition, there was not only a political work that was being put in place, so like a diplomatic, through the, you know, the ministers being able to discuss and engage with each other, but also a technical work that was taking place. And I think this is quite important because, you know, in the international negotiations, you always have different points of view, and that's normal. That's why the multilateral system exists, in order to be able to talk about the different points of view, in order to be able to understand the national circumstances, to see how we can work together and reach agreement and consensus. And I think in the Convention on Biological Diversity, this was the first time that different countries from different regions were able to discuss amongst each other before the negotiations took place. So the coalition provided a safe space, to say in a way, where countries were able to share amongst each other their concerns, their needs, and they were able to exchange those views before starting and entering into the negotiations. So that provided a bit of, you know, we were building the bridges before we went into the negotiations. And I think that was quite key, because at the end, it's only by talking and understanding the others that we were able to advance. And I think this the coordination that was taken also on a technical level was quite important in the adoption of this target. Now, once the target was adopted in 2022, of course, this was a major milestone. I mean, it's quite important. It's not only important, it's crucial for our existence. And I think at that moment, once it was adopted, there was also from the countries a question of, okay, now how are we able to make sure that this is implemented, and that it's implemented swiftly from now until 2030? How can we do to work together in order to make sure that this is actually not only an agreement, but that we actually take the necessary steps in order to be able to achieve the target by 2030? And that's where the Secretariat that now I am directing was created. So it was basically created in order to make sure that countries had the sufficient and the necessary tools and the necessary support in order to be able to implement this target. it happens that many of the most mega diverse countries are developing countries, and are countries that really need that support in order to be able to implement the target. Because, you know, it's also important to make sure that that 30 by 30 is implemented in the most important areas for biodiversity. And it's also making sure that countries have those tools and means in order to be able to implement the target. So I think that's how the Secretariat was created, and that's what I call the phase 2 of the coalition. So it went from more a phase of negotiation, coordination, more a phase of political engagement and, you know, outreach, much more into an implementation phase, where we, of course, maintain that political engagement because we need it, and we need that, you know, engagement at the highest level in order to be able to move that agenda forward, but also the implementation part, which really makes sure that countries have the sufficient means in order to be able to implement this target. So that's why I talk about phase 1 and phase 2. And an important element that I think is needed to be mentioned here as well is the role of the indigenous peoples and local communities. And I think this is something that we included since the phase 1 of the coalition. It has been something that has been central to the coalition. We created a small task force that really looked into the indigenous people and local communities role and making sure that the language of the target included IPLCs. And we made this task force with the International Indigenous Forum for Biodiversity, the IIFB, which is different organizations of indigenous peoples and local communities that have different representatives. And so we were able to discuss in the preparation to the negotiations, which also permitted and facilitated that exchange. And we were able to make sure that we included the correct language in the target when it was adopted. So that's more or less how it worked and how phase 1 and phase 2 came together. And now, as you mentioned, in the phase 1, I was the coordinator on behalf of Costa Rica. On this phase 2, I'm the director of the Secretariat, so I'm no longer working representing Costa Rica. So that's been, you know, it's quite a shift, but at the same time, as I'm very honored and lucky to be able to support in the implementation of this very important goal now with 118 countries, because we have China joining as the latest country to join. That's why I was mentioning 117 countries before. But last year during the climate conference in Dubai, China joined the coalition. So now we have 118 countries, and we continue on engaging with the countries to make sure that they join the coalition and that they have this support in the implementation of this important goal.
Support and implementation. You have a lot of important tools, and we'll put the links to all this in the bio of the show. But I was hoping you could go through just a couple of these. One is the 30 by 30 matchmaking platform, where different countries can submit needs, financial assistance requests, and so forth in the path to getting to 30 by 30. But then there's this really amazing 30 by 30 solutions toolkit, and that is a separate website, 30by30.solutions, where you really go in a deep way into every aspect of country's requirements per 30 by 30. And if, for instance, I'm going to say I'm a small island nation that may understand my marine and coastal systems, but I have issues with biodiversity, I can use the 30 by 30 solutions network to learn and ultimately bring, sort of that part of the equation up, whatever. Could you spend a little time talking about both the toolkit and the matchmaking services? Because I think this is really important.
Of course. So as you were mentioning, and very well put, we have those two different services, to say in a way. So the first one that you were mentioning was the 30 by 30 matchmaking platform. So here, really what we try to do is trying to connect our members' need with the assistance, the offers that are out there. So what happens many times is, first, we need to understand what are the needs from the countries. And then we're able to connect them with what are the offers that are out there. What we have done with this matchmaking tool is really to connect previously with many organizations and try to make sure that we have different offers on the platform available. So it could be offers, a wide array of different offers. So it could be an offer related to, for example, expansion of a protected area. It could be an offer more related into capacity building. It could be an offer related to, engaging with indigenous peoples and local communities at national level and trying to make sure that those processes are put in place. So countries are able to request a variety of different needs within, of course, the 30 by 30. So what we did is that we engaged with many organizations and countries, and we started working on making sure that there were sufficient offers on the platform. As of today, we have over 100 offers that are at the platform ready for the countries to use them. Now we're in the process of making sure that countries understand how the matchmaking platform works and for them to understand how they can submit their requests. So of course, there's a process because countries need to first have an assessment at a national level and understand what exactly are their needs in order to be able to implement this goal. And then once they understand what their needs are, then they're able to submit a request. And that's where we, from the Secretariat, we connect them with the different offers that are available. So in a way, what we've tried to do in this phase of the building of this matchmaking platform is making sure that we have a variety of different offers in order for countries to be able to tap into those offers and supply their needs. That's with the matchmaking platform. And we are doing a lot of work and effort on a regional level, trying to engage with different regions and making sure that countries understand how those tools are used. And the other tool that we developed is the 30 by 30 Solutions Toolkit. This is more of a knowledge platform, as you were mentioning before. And what we did is really try to gather high quality resources on 30 by 30. You know that if a person was not really involved in the negotiation process of this target, it's a target that is over 11 sentences and has so many different, elements included in those sentences. So it's quite difficult for a person to read the target and be able to implement it, for practitioners to be able to take that language and translate it into actions. So what we've tried to do with this 30 by 30 Solutions Toolkit is really try to deconstruct this target and make sure that we have highlighted the different elements of the target, making it a bit more easy to understand for practitioners and for it to be much more easy to implement. Also, this Solutions Toolkit provides, guidance on the different elements that are out there, but also what we're intending to do as we move forward is really try to have the lessons learned and the good experiences from different countries. Because you know that learning from another country, although it might not be exactly the same situation, but for instance, the Maldives is able to learn from a country like Costa Rica. Costa Rica is able to learn from the Maldives on all the process that they're doing and the engagement that they do, for example, with their tourism sector. And same could be happening with Costa Rica on the other side. So I think in a way, in order to be able to advance much more quickly and in order to be able to really learn from other countries, it's important to make sure that there are those connections existing, because then we're able to understand much more, to learn from others, and to move much quicker, because that's what we need now. The urgency factor that I mentioned at the beginning, it was not only for the adoption of the target, but now it's much more also on the implementation. We have, I feel like I'm in, I have like a ticking clock next to my to my ears, because we have less than 6 years to implement this target, and so the time is ticking, and we need to be able to look into the different mechanisms and tools in order to be able to provide those tools and advance as quickly as we can in the different processes. So yeah, those two tools, one provides a bit more of a knowledge and exchange of good practices, and the other one is much more practical, and it's much more on providing offers, responding to the requests from the hack countries.
Could you say a few words about your team at HAC that is responsible for all these amazing programs that you're currently running?
Yes, of course. I mean, it's always quite impressive the work that the team does. I have to say, it's quite a small team. We're 8 people in total, but it's a very, very committed team. So we have Odile, which is the deputy director. She is a specialist in financial issues, and then we have Jason, who's the person that deals with political engagement and political mobilization. Domoina, who's as you might have heard before about the 30 by 30 matchmaking platform. She is the one dealing with a lot of the matchmaking platform and the technical assistance specifically. Juliana, who's leads on the 30 by 30 solutions toolkit. She's also in charge of the capacity building part as well. Katie, who is the support on communication. Brianna, the support on everything related to finance. And then Rebecca, who supports us with all the secretariat internally and externally as well. She's the executive assistant to the secretariat. But I think in general, I always like to mention the team because we do a lot of work and it takes a lot of commitment and passion. Engaging with so many countries and stakeholders, it takes a lot of time. And I just think that it's important to make sure that everyone is recognized and because it takes, when you're so passionate about the work that you do, of course, you can sometimes spend more time and energy thinking about this work that you're doing even more than your personal life. So I know that for sure the team is quite passionate, and I'm very lucky to be able to have such a committed and hardworking team.
Wonderful. Wonderful. One other thing I wanted to touch on, because you mentioned it briefly a couple of times, and I want to make sure the audience understands that, and that's the IPLC programs, Indigenous People and Local Communities, that you're involved in. And this is quite interesting because a couple of years ago, I got to interview a member of the Warani people in Amazonia, Ecuadorian Amazon, who they just won this lawsuit against the major oil company that was destroying the rainforest. And it was quite interesting because, one, we don't normally think of indigenous people. There's a lot of, but there's quite a few. I mean, we're close to 500 million indigenous people still on this planet. And it was really interesting talking to them because they understood nature quite well. And she was, she would tell me the stories. If it rains in the evening, we don't eat these food over here. We don't fish on a certain day. There was a lot going on there that when you talk about knowledge and learning and transfer of this knowledge and learning, that we still have to learn from the indigenous peoples on this planet. I was just wondering if you could say a few more words about IPLC as part of the HAC program.
Yeah, of course, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the indigenous knowledge is essential to all the work that we do. And what we realized very quickly, and at the beginning, there was a lot of criticism towards the 30 by 30 target. And what we needed to do is make sure that indigenous peoples and local communities were involved and were centered in this implementation of 30 by 30. And this is why we started this very close collaboration with the IIFB, which is the International Indigenous Forum for Biodiversity. Of course, there's a wide range of different organizations, a wide range of different representatives from indigenous peoples and local communities. But what we try to do is really to try to listen and understand what the concerns were. I think there was, of course, a need of a shift of paradigm and making sure that all the great effort that has been done by indigenous people was reflected in the work that we were going to do. And this is why we created this task force. Mainly what we did is that we provided this platform where countries were able to listen directly from indigenous peoples and local communities, and were able to understand what their needs were and the importance of having language talking about the respect of their rights, talking about the importance of their knowledge being included. And I think what we did from the beginning was exactly that, creating these linkages between the members, the countries, and the indigenous people and local communities representatives. Once the target was adopted, and the target included, thankfully, a lot of good language on the role and the importance the importance of respecting the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. Once we had that, now we're working much more on the implementation and trying to understand and make sure that countries are able to have inclusive processes at national level with indigenous peoples and local communities. And this is where we've tried to make sure that we continue with this work, and it was not only to make sure that it was mentioned in the target, but actually that in the implementation, And because many of the most important areas for biodiversity are also protected by indigenous people and local communities. And this is something that we need to recognize and highlight as well. And so now we're much more in the process of making sure that in the implementation, we're looking into supporting countries on being inclusive in the process of the creation of those protected and conserved areas, that we're able to have those connections happening from now onwards as well. And I think this coordination and collaboration was quite key. We were very proud to see that many countries of the coalition were also quite advocate for this strong language to be included, and making sure that the respect of the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities was also included within the target. So this is something that has been, as I mentioned before, quite central for us, and we continue on making sure that through the different initiatives and through the support that we're having with the IIFB, that this continues in the upcoming years.
Coming up for the rest of 2024, I mean, I see that you get out to quite a few of the important conferences and meetings in this area. I think the Our Oceans conference just concluded in Greece a couple weeks ago. What else is happening that we should know about in terms of you, in terms of HAC, places that we may listen to you, possibly run into and meet you? Anything else that I missed while we have you today, please?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are a lot of different meetings happening. As I was mentioning before, we always try to engage both at a technical and at a political level. So we are going, part of the team is going to the Democratic Republic of Congo next month in June for a regional workshop, important event that will be happening quite soon. Then we have the Immersed conference that is taking place in Costa Rica. That's the pre-United Nations Ocean Conference that will be taking place in Costa Rica. We will have both a high-level event with ministers, but also a workshop with Latin American countries. Then we will be at the United Nations General Assembly. I mentioned that quite a few times before. It's an important moment to be there because, of course, this is a moment where we're able to also engage with heads of state and heads of government, with ministers, with different ministers, not only ministers of environment, but also making sure that we are engaging with, ministers of finance, ministers of foreign affairs. So it's a quite important moment to make sure that we are also mainstreaming biodiversity in all the different streams at a national level as well. Then there's the Nature Positive Summit that is taking place in Australia. We will also be going there, participating with a high-level event, but also a workshop. There's also the IUCN Leaders Forum, and of course our main kind of big event this year is the CBD COP16, so the Convention on Biological Diversity COP16. This is the first time that we will be meeting, that all parties and organizations will be meeting since the adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which includes the 30 by 30. So this is the first time since 2022 that parties are meeting. And then the last meeting of this year will be the Climate COP29 that will be taking place in Azerbaijan. And so what we try to do is always in those different international meetings, we engage with ministers, with high-level representatives to make sure that they are aware of this target and that the effort at national level is moving forward. But also, as I mentioned before, we make sure that we are having the engagement with the technical teams, because at the end, they are the ones that implement the targets. So we want to make sure that they understand how to use the tools and that they're able to really recognize what their needs and their gaps are. So this is more or less the agenda for the rest of the year, quite intense, as you were mentioning before, but we're quite excited to be able to move forward and make sure that countries are feeling sufficiently supported in this journey.
Speaking of intense journeys, obviously you've been on that and you've been describing your career to us. In reading about you and preparing for this episode, I saw you in sort of the social media chatting about your running journey, and that I learned that you are some type of runner that has read, I don't know how many marathons you've done to date, but I enjoyed how you described it as your coping mechanism. You started doing it about 10 years ago. Do you get to run a lot while you're on your 30 by 30 journey? And any interesting stories about, I guess, training in some of these different countries that you get to? Obviously, I guess, running in Costa Rica is different than running in Azerbaijan, but say a couple words about that if you would.
Of course. And yeah, absolutely. I think running has been not only my coping mechanism, but also it has helped me to really master the art of negotiations, because the negotiations start with myself. So every time, and especially with the marathons, you have to go through a lot of negotiations with yourself on, oh no, I cannot do more than, 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers, 1 mile or 2 miles. And there is a negotiation that happens within your mind where you say, no, 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 maybe if I continue a bit more, I'm able to do that. And you surprise yourself. And same happens, with the negotiations. You have to be able to really master that art of pushing a bit more and making sure that you understand the nuances of the other people. And in this case, the nuances of what you're feeling and how your body is reacting. Yeah, I've been able to, I found running 10 years ago. I've been able to run many marathons. This year I did my fifth marathon, plus one that I did virtually, but that one I don't count because it was virtual. I'm quite an organized person, and there's something called the major marathon. So I'm trying to get the 6 major marathons and having, that achievement being put on the side. I always try to run whenever I'm going to different countries. Of course, depending on the country, it's not, I'm not able to do that, or because of the meetings, it's impossible. Maybe a couple of fun stories that I can mention. One was related to actually, it happened during COP16. I was training for the Tokyo Marathon. And because of the negotiations and how long they were taking, I had to run 21 kilometers or 13.1 miles at the gym of the hotel at 11 p.m. So when everyone was going to sleep, I was going down, hoping that no one would see me because they would think that I'm going insane. But I needed to run that long run of that weekend. Otherwise, I wouldn't, I would feel more insecure when I'm running the marathon. So that I did. And last month, during the Ocean Conference in Greece, this was quite a challenge. I was also going to run the London Marathon a week after, and I had to run. There was some strikes, and I literally had to run from one meeting that I was moderating to another meeting. But that was in high heels, and it was more or less like 1.5 kilometers in high heels. I have to say, not my best time, and but I got to the meeting on time. Well, maybe a minute or two late. Of course, sweating from head to toes, and my high heels were not as comfortable as my shoes, but I was able to arrive. And I think that's where I mentioned that this is running is my coping mechanism. I would have never thought that it would help me with my actual job, but it does in many ways. So yeah, I think it's something that I'm also very passionate about. And whenever someone asks me the minimum thing about running, I'm able to talk about hours of that, because I do think that it also, each one of us is we need to be able to you know make sure that we take care of ourselves, and make sure that we're able to have some kind of a mechanism where we're able to release a bit of the stress and a bit of this weight that we carry on our shoulders, all of us, for different reasons, be it personal, be it for work, or for anything. So I think being able to know what type of things help you to release that stress and to release that pressure is something that is quite important to do. And I'm very lucky to be able to have found that 10 years ago, even before starting very intense work. I was able to find that when things maybe were a bit slower. And now I'm quite lucky to have that. And now I'm going for my Boston run next year. So that's the next stop with the marathons. I try to do once per year, one marathon per year, because otherwise it's too intense to the body and the mind. And with so much work and traveling, it becomes quite tolling. But yeah, that's the next stop, Boston.
To walk like that far. You can walk as far as you can run, but no, it's extremely impressive. And yeah, when I again, thinking back to the importance also of getting out in nature as sort of the theme of everything we're doing here. And if you can merge the two things together, whether it's running, in a tropical situation in Costa Rica or on a beach in Greece or whatever, I think that's awesome. So it's a nice little piece of your story, which I really wanted to highlight as well. So that's great. Really, really impressive, Rita. I just, it's so fascinating listening to your journey, your story, everything that you're lining up for us globally in terms of 2030. And I just really wish you and the team the best with it as you continue to move forward with these goals. Hopefully, we can do a follow up maybe next year to see how things are progressing. Again, for everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode of the show across the various podcast networks, or who'll be watching on our YouTube channel. Again, you've been listening to Rita El Zaghloul, Director, High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People Secretariat, doing really amazing things to champion this new global deal for nature and people. Rita, I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us for a little while, to educate us on everything going on at the HAC. Obviously, thank you for what you do for all of us and nature. And as we like to say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for everybody via what you do. Really a great story.
Thank you so much, Ara. So it was a pleasure sharing with you, and thank you for providing this opportunity to share more about all the work that we do. Thanks a lot.
Great having you.